Okay, we are covering chapter 15 today, which is late adulthood, the psychosocial development. This is basically the last chapter of the book, except for the epilogue, which is death and dying. So, theories of a late adulthood. There are a lot of theories of late adulthood, just as there are theories of every other stage that we've covered this semester. But development during this stage is actually more diverse than at any other stage. People in this stage develop at different rates, and they develop good and bad depending on how they've lived their life. So if they've had a lot of bad things happening in their life, their development is going to take one course. But if they've had a lot of good things happening in their life and have lived a good life, haven't smoked, ate right, exercised, that kind of thing, then their development is going to take an entirely different course. So development really depends on, as we talked about before, the allostatic load. So allostatic events that happen during your lifetime add up to the allostatic load. And if you have a large allostatic load, your development is going to be in a less healthy direction during this stage of life. So some elderly people can run marathons and lead nations, but others are no longer able to move or think. And again, that can be directly resulting from the allostatic load that you've placed on your body throughout your life. So you may not think about it right now, things that you're doing right now, but you have to think about it because things that you're doing right now are actually going to impact your later life. So many scientists, of course, have tried to understand the variations and in general how we get old and what course it takes and why we take such different courses. But to this day, we do not really understand it to a T yet. But we do know that it has to do with the allostatic load placed on your body. So self-theories are these theories that emphasize the core self. So you're trying to maintain your integrity, you're trying to maintain your identity, and that's going to be what you are mainly focusing on in this stage of life. So we're in Erikson's final stage, integrity versus despair, where individuals start to look back on their life and either they are really proud of what they've done and they see that they can accept death and, kind of die with dignity, so to speak, or they are not proud of the things that they've done and they may enter into a dark despair where they, think they have really messed up their life, so to speak, and they have a lot of regrets and they don't want to die before they can resolve those regrets, so to speak. But older adults also rely on experiences more than anything. So they want to integrate their experiences with their community because they feel that they have had all of these experiences and now they want to share them with others. This is the point where they do their life review, and of course, depending on the outcome of that life review, they may make a bucket list or they may actually accept that they're going to die and be ready for it. Or they may take the other route and have so many regrets that they want to resolve them before they die. Most older people will consider their personalities and attitudes stable over their lifespan. They recognize that their body is physically changing, but they think that their personality and their attitudes have not changed much. And that really it depends on the person, because some people's personalities and attitudes have remained stable over their lifetime. Some older individuals still kind of have the attitudes of 60 years ago, while others have kind of changed with the times and have accepted things. Gay marriage, for example, has just been recently made a law, and it's been accepted more and more. But, 80 years ago, it was taboo, and it wasn't something that was common. So some older individuals have just changed with the times and accepted this fact, while others still kind of remain hardcore against it. But they all recognize that their bodies are changing physically. Objects and places actually become more precious during this stage than they were earlier because they identify with them and they think that if they hold on to these objects or hold on to these places, they're kind of holding on to their identity. So they don't want to leave their home. They don't want to get rid of anything. And this can lead to compulsive hoarding, which can be a big problem. if these individuals just hold on to everything they possibly can because they think that if they give anything away, they're giving a piece of their identity away, then that's going to lead to stuff just being everywhere and it becomes a huge problem. Socio-emotional selectivity theory is central to self theories with selective optimization with compensation. So remember, this is where they try to compensate for things that they can no longer do. For example, if they are having trouble seeing at night, they won't drive at night, that kind of thing. The positivity effect is actually the tendency for older people to only remember the positive things from their lifetime, and they don't really focus on the negative things. For example, if somebody went through an abusive period, they kind of put that in the background and don't really focus on that in this stage. They will actually focus on any positive things that happened before or after that abusive time. Selective memory actually compensates for trouble, so it kind of helps them not focus on the bad and only focus on the good. So unpleasant experiences can be actually reinterpreted as inconsequential. So that basically means that they'll look at their unpleasant experiences and the bad things that happened to them in their past and look at them a different way and realize that they didn't really matter as much as they thought they did at the time. So whereas something could have been detrimental to their life when they were 30-something, they look at it when they're 70-something and think, oh, well, that wasn't so bad. So they kind of put a positive spin on the negative. Stratification theories emphasize the social forces, especially if it's directly related to a person in their category or stratum, so who they are with, where they're at in life. It does limit individual choices, though, because it kind of focuses on the fact that a person is basically going to go with the flow. Whatever their social standing is, they will do what everybody else does in that situation, kind of thing. It's going to affect a person's ability to function because past stratification will continue to limit their life in various ways. So if they were, let's say, a lower income individual and they hung out with individuals who were all lower income socially speaking, then that stratification may limit their life, even though they may have moved up economically speaking and socially speaking. The fact that they were once in a lower class, lower category can actually continue to limit their life as they get older. Stratification by gender puts males and females on separate tracks through life. So males are supposed to work and bring home the bacon, so to speak. Females are supposed to raise their children and take care of the household. But that's changed a lot through recent years. So this stratification by gender, the female and male tracks that were once separate are kind of starting to cross now, actually. Stratification by ethnicity, you have ethnic backgrounds and they're going to affect your aspects of development. So education, health, where you reside, your employment. As with gender, ethnicity stratification is kind of changing and getting better so that it's not as stratified as it once was. But unfortunately, we still see these issues in our lives. Hopefully, one day in the near future, we're not going to have these stratifications for anybody. Stratification by income, of course. Income is going to correlate with gender, ethnicity, age, but it's not going to be caused by any of them, they say. So stratification by income is basically how much you make and how that affects your well-being as you're older. So if you have a pension or if you have a retirement fund where you've set yourself up to be taken care of when you are elderly, that's going to influence your well-being. It doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, what ethnicity you are, how old you actually are. It matters on kind of how you've set yourself up. So hopefully everybody's thought about a retirement plan, a 401k, a pension, something, so that when you are older, you are taken care of. Stratification by age. Industrialized nations do segregate elderly people. They kind of shut them out of the mainstream as they grow older. And unfortunately, this harms everyone because it's going to create these deficits for all age groups. If younger age groups can't interact with older age groups, they're not going to have the wisdom of their experience. And if older age groups cannot interact with younger age groups, then they're going to definitely feel left out and kind of shunned into the elderly society. Like they can't go outside of that society and have any kind of friends beyond that, and that's going to hurt them as well. Ageism, as we talked about before, takes many forms. Basically, ageism is judging an individual based on the category you've placed them in, which is their age. So you do not look at elderly individuals as people. You look at them as a group. You see somebody who is older and say, oh, well, they're older, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this. But in reality, some people can do a lot of that stuff. There are elderly individuals that can still work, they can still function, they can run marathons, they can still run up and down stairs, they can carry grocery bags. Now, granted, there are some that can't, but we have to look at elderly individuals as individuals, not as a group. Disengagement theory versus activity theory. Disengagement theory basically results in withdrawal and passivity, where aging makes this person's social sphere narrow. So before they might have had a circle of friends that was, 20 people, but as they get older, unfortunately, their friends start to die and pass on, and so their social group starts to shrink. This is going to be a problem because the fewer friends they have, the more withdrawn they're going to be. So activity theory is kind of on the other side. Elderly people want to remain active in a variety of social spheres. So they want to be with relatives, friends, community groups. They want to be active and have as many friends as possible. Even if friends pass on, they want to make new friends. So being withdrawn is only a result of ageism. They do not want to be withdrawn. They do not want to be shunned. They want to be part of everything. But ageism can harm them negatively because, again, if we look at the elderly individual as, well, they're elderly as a group, you may shun them and not include them. But I can't stress enough how important it is for elderly individuals to look at them as individuals, because that is exactly what they are. Work depends on the individual. The activities are intense and varied because, again, some people can do more than others, unfortunately. The psychological benefits of work can be obtained through volunteer work. So if they cannot have a job to where they get paid for it, they can at least volunteer their time and services and experience and wisdom, and that can give them benefits as well. Work provides a lot of social support and status, so boost your self-esteem when you feel like you're needed, when you feel like you're good at something. So for a lot of people, employment allows generativity. So remember Erickson's stage, generativity versus stagnation. Generativity, if you're out, you're still part of the community and you're active, versus kind of you're stuck in a rut, you're not sure how to get out of it. Employment can allow you to get out of that rut, even if it's just volunteer. So here's the percent of elders age 65 and older who are employed, men versus women. So there are more men employed still versus women, but as you can see, it's kind of starting to go on the rise again. So that's a good thing. If we have our elderly out there working, not even to the extent that they're contributing monetarily or anything like that, but being productive members of society makes them feel better, makes them feel wanted, makes them feel needed and included. So them being a part of that is going to make each individual, older individual, feel better about themselves, and it's going to benefit them in so many ways. So work or retirement. Older adults work because they need money and appreciate that social recognition and fulfillment they get. Employment history affects current health and happiness. Again, if somebody is healthy enough to work, employment can bring them a lot of benefits. Some employers provide bridge jobs where somebody who is working but getting older and going towards retirement, they will give them a bridge job. So maybe they'll be working full-time and then they'll cut down to part-time before they actually retire, that kind of thing. When retirement is precipitated by structural changes, poor health, or fading competence, it correlates with illness. So if somebody has to retire because they cannot work, that correlates with illness. But if somebody retires just because they want to travel or whatever, that doesn't. So again, volunteering, like paid employment, offers generativity and those social connections. Volunteering is correlated with longer and healthier lifespans. Older adults are less likely than younger adults to volunteer, though. So as you can see in this chart, 35 to 54 basically are the highest percentages of volunteering. As you get down to 65 and over, it goes down some. So only 25% of those over the age of 65 actually volunteer. But the important thing is that if they do not have to work, volunteering can actually bring them a lot of joy in other arenas. One of the favorite activities of a lot of retirees is caring for their homes and gardening. So keeping up with these household tasks and maintaining their property makes them want to age in place. What that means is they want to stay in their house. Whatever house they are in, for however long they've been in it, they want to stay there. They often want to stay in the same dwelling where they lived as younger adults. So they want their house to adjust to them when their health starts to fade. So for example, my mom, she's been in the same house for about 20 years or so. As her and my dad got older, they wanted to stay in their house, so they were making adjustments to take care of my dad, putting in ramps and putting in bars on the walls so he could hold himself up and that kind of thing. They didn't want him to go to a home, so they would prefer their house adjusted to them as opposed to they have to adjust, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. A naturally occurring retirement community is a neighborhood or apartment complex where the population is mostly retired people who moved there as younger adults and just kind of never left. And so it's naturally occurring because it just kind of happened. So if a particular neighborhood, everybody kind of moved in because the neighborhood was up and coming at the same time, that neighborhood then has the potential to turn into an NORC because those people may not want to leave as they get older. So an important reason for aging in place and NORCs is that social convoy. They have all of these years of close relationships, so they want to stay there. They want to stay with those close relationships. Religious institutions do fulfill many needs. Older adults are less likely to actually attend religious services, but faith and praying does increase. It may be because they are looking at their life and facing the fact that they may be passing away soon. But religious prohibitions encourage good habits. Faith communities do promote caring relationships. A lot of people in the church will kind of take care of their church, so to speak. And they may find meaning in life and death, and this can reduce stress. As I said, they're to the point where they're kind of contemplating dying. So they need something to give their life meaning and give their death meaning. And that can actually, in turn, reduce stress. Fewer older people turn out for massive rallies, and actually 2% only volunteer in political campaigns. More older people that have a tendency to write letters to their representatives, vote and identify with one particular political party. But many government policies actually affect the elderly, so they need to get more involved. Housing, pensions, prescription drugs, medical costs, so Medicaid, Medicare, that all impacts older people. So their political activity is way down for the amount of impact the policies have on them. So elderly individuals need to realize that everything these individuals are voting on and rallying for directly affect them for the most part. So they need to get more involved and get a bigger voice. Long-term partnerships. Spouses have a tendency to buffer each other against the problems of old age, so it kind of extends life. For example, if the husband starts to get sicker than the wife will help out the husband and kind of be a buffer, or vice versa. So they kind of help each other, which therefore extends their lives. Married older adults are healthier and wealthier and happier than unmarried people their age. So relationship building over the lifespan is very important. So it's really not surprising that elders who are disabled are less depressed and anxious if they have a close marital relationship. So the more disabled an individual gets, the more they need that close relationship. They're going to be less depressed, they're going to be less anxious, they're going to have that help and support that they need, basically. One of the aspects of long-term relationships is how interdependent the partners become over time. So over their lifespan, they've been together for X amount of years, they don't really know how to live on their own anymore. They're so interdependent. I'll give you another example with my mom and dad. They were together for 40 years. And now that my dad's passed, my mom is kind of struggling with how to live without him and how to be on her own because she doesn't know. They were so interdependent on each other that she's not really sure what her next step's going to be. Another aspect of long marriages suggests a mutual respect and interest and close friends, so they have all of these things in common. And older spouses accept each other's frailties and will actually help the partner with their physical and psychological needs. So that's what my mom did for my dad, basically. As his health started failing, she accepted it and helped him through everything. Younger generations, in past centuries, most adults died before their grandchildren was born, but today some families span 5 generations. A beanpole family consists of multiple generations, but only a few members in each one. So you'll have 6 generations coming up, but there's only 5 individuals in each generation, kind of thing. But people are living longer. Medical advancements are helping people live longer. Surgical techniques, medications, this is all helping people live longer. Familialism prompts siblings, cousin, and distant relatives to seek out one another. So, especially as you get older, you may want to find your family. And filial responsibility is that obligation of adult children to care for their aging parents. So oftentimes, adult children caring for their parents kind of falls on them. And you can look at it like, well, they took care of me when I was a child, and now it's my turn to care for them. Or you can kind of look at it as they can go into a nursing home, I'll pay for it kind of thing. So a major goal among adults in the U.S. is to be self-efficient. So the thing that you have to understand is a lot of times these elderly individuals do not want to go into a nursing home. They want to be self-sufficient. They want to be on their own. So oftentimes, if the adult children will just kind of help them do that, it'll be a much happier relationship. Adult children may be more willing to offer support than their parents are to receive it. So oftentimes, parents do not want help from their children, but the children want to help the parents. And again, it relates to wanting to be self-sufficient, wanting to be on their own. So if the adult children try to step in and help their aging parents, they may get resentful and say, we don't need your help kind of thing, because they want to be self-sufficient. But the reality is, and what everybody needs to think about whenever you come to this point in time in your life, is that if you need the help, it's not a bad thing to accept the support. So you kind of have to look at it like parents did take care of children until they could be on their own. And then when the roles reverse and their parents are struggling and having trouble, not only do the children need to be willing to help their parents, but the parents also need to be willing to swallow their pride and accept the help. Relationships between parents and adult children are affected by a lot of things. Assistance arises from need and from the ability to provide. So if parents need assistance, it can be because they're getting older, obviously, and getting more frail and ill. But the children also have to have the ability to provide that assistance, because if the children are not doing well on their own, they're not going to be able to help the parents. The frequency of contact is related to geographical proximity, not affection. So how often you're in contact with your parents is related to how close you are living to your parents, not how much you care about your parents. So I'm going to give you the example of me again. I live across the country from my mom and dad. I don't contact them face-to-face a lot, but I'm on the phone with them a lot, texting them. So the frequency of contact is only because I live on the other side of the country, not because I don't love them. Love is influenced by interactions remembered from childhood. So oftentimes, especially as you get older, you do not remember the bad things, you only remember the good things. So whatever you remember from your childhood is going to impact how you feel today. Sons usually feel a stronger obligation to take care of their parents, and daughters feel a stronger affection towards their parents. Most elders over the age of 65 are grandparents. The nature of the grandparent-grandchild relationship is going to be affected by a few things. Personality, of course, ethnicity, some national backgrounds. Some families are just closer than others, generally speaking, because of their culture or their ethnic background. Past family interactions, maybe something happened to where the parents do not talk to the children anymore, or vice versa, so the grandchildren are kind of hurt by that. And the age and personality of the child. Sometimes it's harder with younger children if the grandparents are really old. Maybe they can't do things with them, they can't hold them, things like that. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes the personality of the child may be harder to handle. And as we get older, it's harder to deal with those kind of things. So it really depends on a lot of different things. Some grandparents have great relationships with their grandchildren, others do not even see them. So in developed nations, grandparents fill one of four roles. They're either remote, which means they're distant. They're companionate, which means they are the fun-loving grandparents and they have a tendency to spoil their grandchildren. They're involved, meaning on a daily basis, or they're actually surrogates, so they're raising their grandchildren because for some reason their children are not in the picture. Elders who never married are usually quite happy, not lonely. But elderly people who have spent a lifetime without a spouse usually have friendships and activities and social connections that kind of fill that void, so to speak. Having a smaller friendship circle isn't a problem if you have at least a few close friends, as most of the elderly individuals do. Normally it's a smaller circle as you get older, but they're really close, which is what's really important. People over 65 and often over 85 are frail if they are ill, cognitively disabled, or physically infirm, meaning just physically unable to do things. Eventually, about 1/3 of older people will become frail before they die, unfortunately. Activities of daily life are actions that are important to independent living. So these are 5 tasks of self-care. You have to be able to eat, bathe yourself, go to the bathroom, dress yourself, and transfer yourself from a bed to a chair. If you can't do any of these tasks, it's a sign of frailty. Instrumental activities of daily life are actions that are important to independent living, and that actually requires some intellectual competence and forethought. So the ability to perform these tasks may be even more crucial to self-sufficiency than the daily tasks. So if you cannot do these things that are important to live on your own, that require competence and forethought, then you may not be able to be qualified to live on your own. And that's when you have to start looking at nursing homes or even your children helping in. So managing your medical care, food preparation, transportation, communication, maintaining your household, managing your finances, these are all daily activities that are instrumental to independent living. If you cannot manage your finances, you're not going to be able to stay independently living because you're not going to have any money. Something is going to happen to it. If you can't figure out transportation, if you cannot maintain your household, if you have a house and your grass is 2 feet tall, that is not maintaining your household. If it's falling apart kind of thing. If you can't figure out meals, food preparation, you're not going to be able to feed yourself. If you can't make doctor's appointments, those kind of things. So whose responsibility is this? Family caregivers experience substantial stress because when they're caregiving for their parents, let's say, or whatever family member is caring for the frail elderly, they go through stress on a daily basis because they're trying to do everything for this individual while still taking care of their own responsibilities. Their health may suffer and their risk of depression increases, especially if the care receiver has dementia. Dementia is one of those very difficult disorders to deal with. When the individual starts to forget who they are and who you are, that's a very stressful thing to deal with. So if you are giving care to a frail family member, that's going to add to your stress and your risk of depression. And then if there's dementia on top of that, that doubles it. In the U.S., the spouse is the usual caregiver, but again, depending on what condition the spouse is in, that may or may not be possible. Even if you have ideal circumstances, family caregiving can present problems. If one adult child is the primary caregiver, other siblings may either feel relief or jealousy. They may be jealous that they're the one that gets to take care of their parents, or they could be like, oh, whew, I dodged a bullet on that one kind of thing. Care receivers and caregivers will often disagree on things like doctor visits and what time they should eat, what they should eat, that kind of stuff. Resentments on both sides can disrupt that mutual affection and appreciation they have. So if the care receiver, for example, is resentful about the food that they are eating or the times that they are eating, they may resent the caregiver. And if the caregiver doesn't understand why the receiver is so resentful, it can cause a lot of problems. And public agencies rarely do not step in unless it's an emergency situation. So it's very difficult to get help. So how do you prevent frailty? Well, it depends. Disability is dynamic, not static, meaning disability changes all of the time. So you can change the disability and maybe help the disability by going through therapy or something like that, depending on what the disability is, of course. Assist with extending self-sufficiency. So help your parents, for example, be able to be self-sufficient. Make sure they have everything they need to be self-sufficient. Make sure that maybe you help keep up the house, maybe mow the lawn, that kind of thing. But they have to do their part too. They can't just expect everything to be done for them and still be able to live on their own. Mobility does change depending on what the illness is. Sarcopenia is an illness that can actually kill you. It has to do with your muscles and you lose the ability to use them pretty much. Osteoporosis, again, with your bones, your bones become very frail, and if you fall, you can break bones very easily. And balance, if you have balance issues in your inner ears, you may not be able to walk because you can't balance yourself. So all of these things where you can't move, you can't walk as well, you can't, run for sure, And if you fall, you could hurt yourself really bad, pose problems. So problems with IADLs may be worse than problems with ADLs, and family and community involvement may be crucial. So again, the broader spectrum may be worse than daily activities. Social support networks prevent physical and mental decline. So the more help you have, the more support you have, the better off the individual is. And a range of safeguards and education are needed to prevent frailty. So individuals need to know that, this can happen if you don't take care of yourself. This can happen if you don't help out, that kind of thing. Caregiving is difficult when a person is failing with their instrumental activities. You have to select a designated caregiver, and that's going to vary by nation, culture, and ethnic group. They often have disagreements about nutrition, medical help, and dependence may actually occur. Integrated care is the ideal model. So maybe you want more than one individual helping and taking care of the elderly person. Maybe if it's parents, all of the children could pitch in, and integrate their care and make sure that their parents are getting everything they need, but help as a family instead of just one individual child is designated to give all of the care. So you kind of want to get everybody involved as much as possible. Elder abuse, it's likely if the caregiver suffers from emotional problems or substance abuse because they are having problems on their own, so they will take it out on the elderly. If the care receiver is frail, confused, and demanding, the caregiver will more likely abuse them. And if the care location is isolated so they won't get caught, kind of thing. It's less likely if care is introduced in a timely and appropriate manner, and if the staffing and supervision are adequate. You want to make sure there are safety nets in place, both public and personal, because we want to avoid elder abuse at all costs. The elderly are too often made targets for abuse because they look like easy prey. And unfortunately, some people take advantage of that. So we need to prevent it at all costs by doing everything we possibly can. Overall, the emphasis in living arrangements is on that selective optimization with compensation. So making sure that you're minimizing whatever they can't do very well. You want to compensate for it. Elderly people need settings that allow them to be safe, social, respected, and independent as possible. Elderly people do not want to depend on anybody. They still want their independence. So they need to be in a setting that allows them to be as independent as possible so that they can still feel respected. Nursing homes, assisted living, and professional home care vary in quality and availability. Sometimes they are really great and available. Other times only the poor ones are available. The really good ones are all booked. Sometimes there aren't any quality ones, available, and sometimes nothing is available. It just really depends on where you're at. The U.S. trend is aging in place. So in the U.S., more individuals want to age where they're at instead of going to a nursing home. They just want help where they are. And that is all. So I will talk to you later. Bye.